Good morning, everyone. My name is Randall from Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab, providing tips on language learning, culture, and human development. And I am excited about today's broadcast because today we're going to have on Anthony Michael Ezegbulan from Nigeria, who is going to be speaking, I think, about a very relevant topic to all of us. He's going to be covering a couple of things. Number one, in understanding the struggles in low resource environments in Nigeria. But another focus is to suggest ways and to highlight some of the relevant situations that other teachers in this world find themselves in, situations that are often overshadowed with technology and so many other resources out there. So let me go ahead and bring on our guest today, Anthony Michael.
Hey,
Good morning, Anthony. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Good morning. It's my
Great. And
pleasure
let's
to be
go
here.
ahead and kind of highlight some of the things that we're going to cover today, Anthony
Yeah.
Michael. As I just mentioned, we're going to be talking about some of your experiences in Nigeria, but around the world, you could say. And what we want to do is we want to bring in voices from around the world who are sharing similar experiences and how your ideas can be relevant to them. So, in order to begin with, Anthony Michael, could you just do a brief introduction of yourself, and then we'll get into today's broadcast?
Uh, Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be here. My name is Anthony Michael Ezebulam. I am from Nigeria. I studied in a University of Ibadan, um, philosophy, and I majored in African culture and interaction with Europe, specifying, the role of language and the cultural interaction that happened. I also completed my master's in 2015. In 2016, I found myself in Peru working, and right now I'm in the United States. So it has been a very wonderful experience, and I have 12 years of teaching experience. So
Great.
it's my thank you.
Great. And again, we see some warmest greetings from Ilva and also from John, who is from Nigeria. So
Yeah,
thank you very much. And just so that people are aware of how we do these broadcasts, if this is a broadcast where we wouldn't encourage participant engagement, then you could just watch it later on YouTube as a pre-recorded video. But what we're trying to encourage is audience participation who might share comments, thoughts, ideas that are related to today's broadcast.
yeah.
So, Anthony Michael, let's briefly talk about when people think about Nigeria. What is perhaps the stereotypical image or that we would like to dispel, and then we'll share some ideas with people so that they have some framework under which to understand your country.
Yeah, Nigeria is a great country. It's a very important place in global uh, talk about the Committee of Nations. It is the seven, as you can see, the seventh most populous country in the world and the most populous country in Africa. And of course, we have varied languages, tribes, cultural backgrounds, ethnic groups. And of course, our capital is Abuja, with Lagos as the center of commerce. Nigeria is the largest oil, and gas producer in Africa. And we have famous artists and writers. When you come to academics, our Nobel laureate, Wole Soyinka, Chinua Achebe, Chimamanda Adichie, and all the rest of them. So we are a great nation with great people, and I'm proud to be a Nigerian.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Before we get into the main part of the broadcast, just a little bit about your background. I know you introduced yourself, your teaching experience, and then often I ask, how did you decide on becoming a teacher? Did you just wake up one day and, oh, I'd like to be a teacher? Or did that evolve over time?
Well, I wanted to be a teacher, but in a different forum. I schooled in a Catholic seminary. My idea was at the end of my study, probably after ordination, I would go for studies and then come back to teach. But I couldn't make it to ordination due to some certain factors. And then I found myself teaching. So I would say that I am an accidental teacher, but the hunger to help the coming generation has always been there from my childhood. How we can make those that are coming behind us better so that they can pilot the affairs of our country, of our culture,
Right.
as a people, as a society, has been there from childhood. So I would say that a born teacher.
And then some of the places that you've taught over the years, I mean, going from Nigeria to other places, I think is quite unique.
Yes, I would say I started my teaching, let me say, officially in Nigeria at Glory Academy, Orogo Ibadan. That's where I started my teaching, where I received the employment letter, received my pay as official teacher in the school. So, but education issues, education affairs has taken me to Ghana, Republic of South Africa, and then I found myself in Peru for the past 7 years. So I
Now
was
that's a big jump.
that was a big job, really big job, for the past 7 years. And now I'm in the United States also in education. So it has been a very wonderful experience. So put together, I would say 12 years of teaching experience.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Mm.
Well, let's go ahead and go on to the next part of the presentation. And what we want to emphasize is Anthony and Michael and I would like to address any of the comments and questions. Feel free in Facebook to post any comment there that will and can appear on the screen here. We'd like to bring in conversation and comments that you might have to Anthony, Michael, or to the particular topic. So, Anthony, Michael, as we start to talk about Nigeria, just very briefly before we get into some of the main points, describe Nigeria's case, low resource environment, and we're going to talk more specifically in a few minutes. But I know that you're going to be emphasizing a little bit about post pandemic effects. Could you
Yeah.
briefly talk about that? Then we're going to talk about a typical classroom, and then we're going to go into some additional details about Nigeria.
Yes. Let me begin by saying that the post pandemic experience opened our eyes. The post pandemic experience showed us that we have no strong education system. During the pandemic, we realized that we lost a lot in terms of education. And the aftermath of the pandemic, we had a 7 month strike, among the university students. So everything, I would say that during that time, we realized that we have no strong education system in Nigeria. Then going to low resource, it shows that whatever the government is providing for education is not even half of enough of what we need as prescribed by UNESCO. So in that case, I would say that Nigeria, is a low-resourced country when it comes to education, and I'm advocating that we do more because education is a powerhouse for every nation to become, productive, in the
Right.
community of nations.
So let's talk about this. When you talk about some of the challenging situations in Nigeria, and certainly those that are watching, we're interested in hearing the same questions, a typical building. And we're going to talk also, Anthony and Michael, about private versus public schools so people have a better understanding. What does the traditional building look like, class size, school materials, the internet, teaching resources and so forth, teacher training. Could you briefly give us kind of a snapshot so that people can better understand that? And those that are watching, feel free to share your own teaching experiences. What is the typical classroom like?
Yeah. Okay, let me start by saying that in Nigeria, education today is divided into two, the private and the public. And the beautiful thing is this, looking at the United States of America, I realized that the government is, do a kind of chartered with the private sector and fund them in one way or the other. But in Nigeria, the other is the case is different. The private tax parents to be able to run the school. That is the reason why it is very, very expensive. Why the schools, what we call public schools, managed by the government, is nothing to write home about. So coming to building, we have some classrooms that have no roof. We have some classrooms that have no desk. We have some sufficient desk and chairs.
Mhm.
We have some classrooms that are meant for 30 people, but when you come there, what you will see is between 50 to 70 children. These children sit on the ground. They have no books. They have no pen. Even the resources that teachers need to teach, the teachers buy them themselves. And from my own little experience, when I was there, I realized that teachers provide whatever they need by themselves. There is no internet in public schools. There is no books provided by the government. Even
Where's the
in
copy machine?
no copy machine, nothing. In a case where the government provides, then
Okay.
it is insufficient due
Okay.
to corruption. The government probably allotted some certain amount of money to provide such things. The people that are in charge will mismanage the money, and at the end of the day, not even up to half of what is intended to will be achieved. Then, when it comes to teacher training, I think the government is doing nothing to do teacher training. The only policy I realized recent time is if you studied in a university and you wish to lecture, you go and
Right.
do some courses in Teachers Institute. But ask me, how much has government injected in this teacher institute to train teachers within the framework of the 21st century? Nothing. We have nothing like that. And then when it comes to teachers' resources, our teachers are one of the poorest of the population in Nigeria. So when teachers are hungry, I wonder how they will be comfortable in teaching the students.
Right. And it's interesting. I think, Anthony Michael, I know there's another teacher from Nigeria watching as well. And I'd be really interested, as we already mentioned, of how the ideas presented today. What is your teacher, your traditional classroom like in a public school in terms of teacher resources, student numbers? And you mentioned, Anthony Michael, when you're talking about sitting on the floor, you're not talking about a carpeted floor.
No, no carpeted floor. I
Air
mean,
conditioning.
floor as it is in a raw
Okay, and
manner.
again, I'm not trying to present an overly simplistic image, but at the same time, we want people to understand of the real challenges of teachers. And I could imagine as I think about this, Anthony Michael, what is going through the minds of these public school teachers who are facing this type of situation? Is it trepidation, fear, excitement? What could be some of those emotions? And how are those emotions similar or different than our own?
Yeah, I am a product of a public school, but what made my father to verge to remove me from public school and then took all of us, myself and my brothers and sisters, to private school, is because of the situation we found ourselves. The teachers themselves are not happy now. Whereby I remember one of my teacher in primary three, what we call grade three here. I remember she will give us fish, water to go and sell for her. And I refused. She failed me. She failed me because I refused. I said, I came to school to learn. I'm not here to sell for you. I said, look, if you don't sell for me, how can I eat? How can I fuel my car and
Right.
come to school? Because the average salary of a teacher in Nigeria is less, with today mid-market rate, exchange rate, is less than $20.
No.
So if that is the case, and these teachers also have children to take care of, they have
Mm.
families and issues to take care of. So how can they be happy to teach these children? So they suffer a lot psychologically, emotionally, mentally, and professionally.
Yeah.
And it seems as if our education, we are just stuck at the middle, no going forward, no backwards.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and point out a couple of these interesting, relevant data points.
Yeah, of course. When we talk about Nigeria as a low resource country when it comes to education, we are talking about, a country that has over 70% of its population under the age of 50, which means Nigeria has a lot of young people at their productive age.
Mhm.
But the question now is, are they trained? Are they educated to be productive? Well, let's look at the example of the 2023 budget. According to the Global Education Agency, UNESCO, Nigeria has over 20 million children out of school. That is, children that cannot continue to be educated. That's what I mean. children
Mhm.
out of school, and then approximately 25 million children who have no access to schooling. That is, who cannot go to school due to one factor or the other. For example, the issue of security.
Yeah.
And this junk of these children are found in the north. The south is also suffering the same, but the north is hitting harder over there. And I found it very, very, fortunate that we are in this kind of situation. So we have a very youthful uh, uh, population, but we are not educated to be productive. And that is the reason why we are rescinding economically. So it's a very big issue that our government need to talk about.
Yeah, and you mentioned several different issues. You mentioned security issues. We talked about distance. There's no jumping on an Uber or, a
No,
local train system or anything like
no,
that. And I could just imagine the emotional burden and the challenges of going to school, the amount of time. I mean, if you're walking 6, 7, 8 kilometers, by the time you get to work, to school, you're probably exhausted. And then the idea of coming home and maybe carrying on family chores or whatever that must be. And the idea of homework. I mean,
yes.
the kids
Yes,
won't get that.
when I talk about distance, it's a very serious situation because when you come to a state, you see that the functional school is far away, probably at the center of the city. So the children in the villages will have to find their way down there. So in most cases, these children are discouraged. That's why none of them have access to education right now. So
Yeah,
those of them that try as much as they can to go to this school, they have to walk a very long distance.
yeah,
Probably by the time they arrive at the school is over. Walking. There is nothing like school bus, or transportation, or good road networking, or even the issue of security is nothing to write home about. And most parents are afraid to allow their children to take
yeah.
such long distance. And I believe Nigeria is not only the country that is suffering this. There are many other countries that are in this kind of situation.
And it would be interesting right now for those of you that are watching. You mentioned, Anthony Michael, about distance, security, and so forth. For those that are watching, please share some of your comments on some of the challenges facing students, especially access to education. John Michael, he says, "Thank you, Michael. I'm just going to post this. We're going to cover ourselves right there, Anthony Michael, because I think
Yeah.
this comment, John, is really relevant." He says, "Thank you, Michael, for your insightful experience." Let me go ahead and read this. Related to Nigeria, I am particularly interested in the difficulty we face in large classrooms, especially where the teachers have no teaching aids. The students are not learning in any convenient place. I'm a researcher and a teacher here in Nigeria. Let me ask, can I partner to conduct an in-depth research on any area of your interest about Nigerians' educational sector? And I
Hmm.
think perhaps, John, you can post a message this message, and Anthony Michael, perhaps you can respond to that in
Yeah.
Facebook, a private message to that, because thank
Yes.
you,
Yeah.
John, for sharing that comment, because
Yeah.
the whole purpose of this too, Anthony Michael, is to develop collaborative efforts so that
Yes.
people can do that.
Yes. I will
Well,
get you. Yeah. Let's continue.
yeah, and thank you, John, for sharing that. Let's go on. I think so. We're dealing with these issues. Let's talk, Anthony Michael. You mentioned a multi tiered system of support. Let's talk about each one of these and then perhaps how they could be relevant to different places, like in Haiti or in wherever it might be. I mean, because there are low resource environments here in the United States. We have to be clear that they're everywhere. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these. And let's go ahead and begin with a response to interventions on how to support students in Nigeria, but also in other areas as well.
Yes, the education sector in Nigeria is like a malnutrition child. When a child is malnutrition, what you need is to feed the child. I wouldn't say to kill the child or eliminate the child. No, it's to
Right.
feed the child. Now, that is the reason why I am proposing this multi-tiered system of support. When we have this kind of multi-tiered system of support, we will have a kind of a robust way of trying to fill in the gaps which the post-pandemic experience pandemic experience and post-pandemic experience are created. Now, why am I saying this? Because this system of support has a kind of interventions. Now, there are varied levels of interventions. In Nigerian situation, when a child is not doing well in academically, there are only two people to blame: the child, blamed by the parents; the teacher, blamed by the school. But even in public school, nobody cares. In a government-run school, no one cares. In private sector, yes, a teacher can be brought in and talked to and even discussed with. But in
Right.
the government, no, nobody cared about that. And majority of the population of the Nigerian children are in the public school. We are talking about over 60% of Nigerian population, children to be in the public school. So in a public school where nobody talks about interventions, nobody talks about how to help a child, then
Right.
I think we'll begin to think towards that way. And of
Right.
course, in Nigeria, when a child is also not doing well, even in a case where they want to help the child, they only focus on academy, the academic work. Oh, give him more lessons, give him more extra classes, give him more. People refuse that when it comes to education as a whole. It involves the mental, the social, the psychological, and of course, the behavioral aspect of it. And that is the reason why I'm also proposing this, because this support system also encourages a kind of positive behavior intervention. There will
Right.
be academic going on, there will be behavioral going on. Another factor is the universal design for learning. Now, this system of support does not limit itself within the serenity or within the country or within the system. It goes to borrow from the universal design, like from UNESCO, make consultation from other spheres to see. And of course, it's also a very wonderful support system because it also includes the situation of social and emotional curriculum. Begin to monitor the child's social development, the emotional, reactions. So it's a very robust way of trying to support these children that somehow, do not have what it takes to be educated, as it is
Yeah.
rare in Nigerian case.
And every one of these, Anthony, Michael, we could spend hours talking about because they are relevant. And when you mention about feeding children, and I certainly do not want to diminish any learning environment because I'm sure that in situations in Nigeria and around the world, people are literally starving and hungry. And it's really difficult to focus on a lesson when you came to school hungry. And I know my wife is a school teacher, and for low income children at her school, they have the option and ability to get a free breakfast. But we're talking, I mean, in Nigeria and other places, we're talking about situations that need to really be considered. I don't know what it would look like, and I'm sure we could talk more about that. But I guess my general principle and idea is that if you're coming to school and you've walked 5, 6, 8 kilometers, and maybe along the way you already ate whatever lunch you brought with you, then you're going to be at school. I mean, tell me about the lunchroom. I mean,
We
what do
don't have such a thing.
I
In the public sector,
know.
government, we don't have such a thing. Even where they claim that they were feeding school children, the
Right.
effect is as low as 10%. You
Yeah.
know, and the private sector where we have something like that, then the parents pay a lot of money to achieve that. But the situation in Nigeria today is that 70% of the parents we have cannot afford such system of education. And
Yeah.
that is where the problem is. So I think our government, Ministry of Education, should start thinking more about how to bring all these things together to make a child, holistically
Yeah.
educated, not
And
just.
one of the things, sorry to interrupt, but one of the things that was brought up by a teacher from Haiti, commenting before the broadcast, I was in contact with the person, and they were talking about, not only you're dealing with hunger, but what about the violence? What you hear outside, the noise and the traffic, and sirens that really could impact, a child's ability to focus. And you mentioned about emotional welfare.
Yeah, of course. In Nigeria today, most of our public education sites are not conducive environment for learning. Why did I say that? I remember in my own village, where our own community school is surrounded by four tiered of road network.
Mhm.
So I wonder how students can be when I compare it with where I am today in the United States. I be in my room, lock up my room. There is air conditioned. There is everything I need. So whatever that is happening outside, we don't know until we finish whatever we are doing inside. But the Nigerian case is this: we have tiered road networks. Sometimes farmers with some of their cattle will roll in
Mhm.
into the school compound. Sometimes the youth that are not in school will decide to play on the pitch or on the field or whatever, and then there is a lot of distraction. There is no security, nothing like fenced round gates. No, most of our public school do not have all these things. So the school is not the compound generally. The serenity of that place is really a big problem.
Right.
So we don't have such thing. Now, where we have such thing in the private sector, then we have to cough out a lot of money to get that. But most parents in Nigeria cannot afford that.
Yeah, and one of the things, if I were a teacher trainer in Nigeria, I think a lot of teachers, I'm thinking about, and I'm pointing about the social emotional curriculum, not only for students, but perhaps for teachers. When I think, if I were to, for example, give a presentation or meet with Nigerian school teachers, number one, there is no way that I would be able to say, I know how you feel. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just no way to do that. And a lot of times, I think a lot of the teachers don't want necessarily give me 22 different solutions to fix every problem, but just to understand how I struggle. It's kind of like those soft skills of compassion and empathy and just saying, you know what, this must be really difficult for you.
Is a
Versus,
very I am becoming emotional because I know what the people there are suffering. I know
yeah,
my teachers, what they suffered and what they are still suffering today. It's a situation where you are your own. At the end of the month, come and take your $20. Finish. Case closed. Nobody asks you about your welfare. I remember during the pandemic in Peru, my school provided an opportunity whereby the teachers will gather together, do a kind of, you know, um, spaced exercise. I
right,
remember that. On Monday, we say, okay, teach from so time to so time. Come to the school compound with your mask, and then let's see how you're feeling. Let's see how you're doing.
right.
But in Nigeria, no, there is nothing like welfare for the teachers. No, no, but they're paying tax, you know. And at the end of the day, they are suffering as professionals.
Mhm.
They are suffering as people who care for the younger generation. They are also suffering as family people.
Yeah.
So I would say that teachers in Nigeria are nothing to write home about. I think they are the best to endure and to still work there.
And let me ask you, and it would be interesting to hear from John from Nigeria. How many teachers would even have access to the technology to watch a broadcast like this?
If we are talking about if we are talking about the public
Public school teachers.
school teachers, none, zero. I mean zero, because I have not heard and I have not seen any public school that has internet facility. I've
Okay.
not heard about that. Probably they may have. That will serve only at the principal's office or
Yeah.
the headmaster's office, probably.
And
But
again, yeah.
yes, so they can't. They don't have access to that.
So I would be interested in hearing from those that are watching the broadcast right now, to what extent do teachers have access even to professional development like what we're doing today, to receive some type of support? That would be interesting.
They-
Now, Anthony Michael, we talked about, and you briefly talked about some of these points. And again, we certainly could go into more depth, but I want to talk about these. Whether no matter what you do, no matter what system, no matter, how you are determining and trying to resolve issues within your school, how do these points relate to any teaching situation and also in Nigeria?
Yes, I would say that in the Nigerian context, even my own personal experience, So, technically speaking, parents are not involved in the education formation of their children. You know,
Now,
where it was later introduced is in the private sector, where you have the PTA, a very strong PTA, where parents begin to question because they pay a lot of money to these private schools. But in the
right.
public, nothing. The only thing the parents have to do is to wake you up in the morning, take a shower, go to school. So poor parents will manage to get some writing materials. The written materials nowhere to be found. Okay, so engaging parents, probably the Minister of Education will have to rethink about it to see how they can, in revitalizing the education ministry, especially in the public sector, they have to find a way to begin to engage parents because parents know their children more than we can think about. They know their capabilities, they know what they can achieve, they know what they can do
Yeah.
and what they cannot do. You know, so that's why I'm proposing this.
Now,
If we begin in Nigeria to involve parents, then that will be one area that we'll begin to see how it goes.
and let me bring in a couple of things. First of all, John from Nigeria says no teacher has access to internet facilities like you mentioned. And thank you, John. And the other thing is engaging and involving parents. One of the things you mentioned earlier is about safety. So even if you emphasize to parents the importance of education and they realize that there's a safety issue, you know, I think that would impact whether they send their children or not, to a
That
certain
is
degree at least.
Yes, that is why we are experiencing. In fact, by the end of this year, it is projected that we will have close to 50 million children out of school, unless our government do something when it comes to security.
Now, are
The
you saying that number is growing?
yes, it's
Okay.
growing because they kidnap. The
Okay.
kidnap situation in Nigeria is nothing to write home about. As it is right now, it is very important for someone to move around carefully. Anything can happen any day, anytime, broad daylight. So the security situation in Nigeria is not, it's not good at all. So the government has to do something about it. If not, we will have almost all our children in the public sector out of school by the end of this year
Okay.
because it's getting bad, really,
Mhm.
getting really, really bad.
Yeah, and let me ask you where you're talking, so trying to get teachers engaged and so forth. The next point you're talking about collaborating with school teachers, leaders, head of departments, student personnel. That sounds nice, but what is the roadblock block to accomplish that?
The thing is, we don't even have this kind of structure in Nigeria.
Oh, okay.
What we have is teachers and their headmasters, and in the public sector, teachers and the headmasters. It is in the private sector you will hear there is somebody that has to do the social worker, the psychologist, and all that. We don't have that in the public sector. So what do we do? Because for them, school is for only for teachers and the headmaster, who is the head.
So let me ask you, sorry to interject, but when
Yeah.
you're looking at a private public school,
Yes.
okay, tell me, let's say it's a public school. What does the personnel look like? You have maybe a couple of teachers. Do you have you mentioned psychologists, but I'm assuming you're talking about private schools.
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't have any other personnel that handles some certain things like the emotional situation, the psychological situation, the behavioral situation. No, what we have is the couple of teachers, their children in the school, and the headmaster probably, or the head teacher probably,
Mhm.
as the case may be. So we don't have this other extra department where behavioral, mental, psychological situations are, evaluated, are brainstormed. Like I told you, when a child is not doing well in education, there are only two people to be blamed. The first is the child himself or
Mhm.
herself, as the case may be, by the parents, that he or she is not doing well. The second is, or probably the headmaster in the public sector, because I wonder, in the public sector, the headmaster will ask, yeah, why is it that we have a lot of people that are not doing well? The teacher can give any excuse. There is no data-driven idea. There is no exact measurement of growth and development. No, in the public sector.
Yeah, well, the challenge is I think, and again, you mentioned about who shares the blame and so forth, and I'm sure teachers don't want to feel that they're a problem to be fixed without sufficient support. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but when I think about involving parents and collaborating with school leaders and so forth, and gathering relevant information and data, and again, John said that he might be interested in engaging with you. That's one example. But the other thing is that do you think anything like this is going to change within the next 5 to 10 to 15 years? And what do you think it must be?
Well, I think as it is right now, I am not expecting it at least in the next 4 years. I don't think anything will change in the next 4 years because we are grappling with issue of feeding Nigerian population. We are in a very bad state when it comes to economy right now in Nigeria, right now. So I don't think anything will change in the next 4 years. Probably after 4 years, depending the outcome of the election, who will be our leader, then we'll see. Because the last election held in 2022, there are some people that believe that a particular candidate who is well traveled, well exposed, who understand what it is to be educated, who understand the education sector very, very well. The youths yielded for him, but unfortunately, he didn't win. And we have someone that most youths do not want, because they believe that he doesn't really have what it takes to understand what education is. So
Right.
if we can have such a person, I will vouch for him that he can begin to revitalize some of these things and begin to listen to people like us, to do some of these things in the public sector, especially.
Okay. Now, let me mention here, I know Elva is watching from Haiti. I think we had communication before the broadcast, and I'm going to post this comment up here. He says, I'm now working for an educational institution that is operated on donations. So I'm very fortunate to have access to electricity, internet. But Michael, there's nothing you mentioned here that is a surprise to me when I think about what most teachers and schools children are experiencing: hunger, no access to power, technology, no school supplies, frustrated teachers, in addition to violence and all forms of instability. Certainly, that can be a huge challenge. Thank you, Elva, for mentioning those points. And again, when he talks about electricity, what is it like there, Anthony, Michael? I mean, what power? I mean, what do you have? If you're gonna, do you have power, for example, to plug in a CD player or something like that, or is that just a wish dream, a pipe dream?
Nigeria is a modern country, but just that some people have decided not to make it work. That's what I mean. Because how
You're
can
talking
we?
about in schools, some public schools, right?
Yes. How can we have a population of 240 million people and we can just generate only 30,000, not even up to 30,000, less than 30,000 megawatts of electricity? It's not going to work. It's not going to work. Even my experience 7 years ago with a teaching hospital, our best teaching hospital that produced some best brains here in the United States. That is the UCH, University Teaching Hospital of the University of Ibadan, where I studied. I took somebody there to do dialysis of the kidney. There was no light, so the person we have to do manual. I was about 3 kilometers away. I heard him screaming because of the pain he was going through. So if with teaching hospital can't even boast of 24-hour electric, no, we don't have electric power in the public sector when it comes to education. Nothing is there. We don't even have electricity. Most schools don't even have any electric stuff there. No.
Well, let
Most.
me go ahead and I just received a text from the president of Nigeria. He's
Yeah.
watching.
I wish he will. I wish he
Now, let
will.
me ask you, to kind of wrap things up, I want to ask you two questions. Number one, first of all, if you were asked, not generalities, But if you were asked two things that Nigeria could do, or any country that is faced with similar low resource environments, and people wanted specifics, what would you say? I mean,
Well,
you
I
don't have
would
to fully implement a full plan, but
yeah.
is there any two or three specifics? And then the next question is, you're meeting with Nigerian teachers or Haitian teachers or Mongolian teachers, and they asked you and invited you to speak to them, and they want desperately, they're working in low resource source environments, of what they can do to change things in some small way. What would they be? Let's start with the president of Nigeria. What would you say?
First and foremost, I need him to do two things for me.
Okay.
Make electricity very affordable
Okay.
and make internet very affordable. Leave the rest for Nigerians. We are hardworking people. We are smart. We are intelligent. I know that if we have constant electricity and internet, forget it. We can do any other thing by ourselves. Then for fellow teachers in other low resource countries,
Yeah.
I think one of the things is to bring themselves together, actually, is to bring themselves together, a kind of form an organization or association, whatever, and begin to brainstorm and then research, research, try and see whether you can go out of your comfort zone and research about things, about theories, about, applications of 21st century education system. And then collaboration and communication, if possible, with other clients. Actually, that's what I have done to develop myself. I was in Nigeria, communicating with people in other countries, and that is where I am, today. So by the time you begin to collaborate and communicate with people from other clients, they
Right.
will bring in their own expertise, their own ideas. You can borrow from there to develop whatever you have.
And
Electricity, if
yeah.
that's it, and internet, forget it. The remaining is will be solved by us, really.
Because it seems like, at least if you have internet, and I don't know, again, in Nigeria and other countries, even if teachers have the time or the energy, I don't know what it's like to go from one school to the next. What is the distance between public schools? But even if they had the internet, maybe something like this to chime in, like with Zoom or something like that, to be able to share some of the challenges and some of the tools that you're using, I think would be significant.
Yes, if we have internet is a very expensive commodity in Nigeria. It's a very expensive commodity in Nigeria because I know from my own little experience to connect from Nigeria to other parts of the world is a very big problem.
Yeah.
But when I came to Peru, it was really easy for me. So if they can make internet affordable as low as possible and then give us light, the remaining is not. In fact, 80% of the problem is solved because I believe that a Nigerian teacher can use internet with electricity, go in there, research, make some contacts, bring in ideas, and innovate.
Yeah.
Some people are ready to do it if you give them a space of time. But the
Yeah. And
question is,
you
yeah,
probably could leave the floor as is, the walls as is. I mean, there's a lot
yeah,
of things that you would
yeah,
need to give priority to, and then
yeah.
certainly going back to food and hunger are relevant as well. But
Yeah,
I think internet is
yes.
a big
Now,
thing.
that is the situation. Even most children don't really need the school to feed them. They are not really ready for that.
Yeah.
But make it easy for their parents to give them whatever they can afford. You know, leave the subsidize some certain things, at
Right.
least food. When they have enough food at home, they don't need school. They don't need school. Nigerian children, we are we are mentally strong. When I look at what is going on there, and I still see people laugh, jump, I begin to wonder that we are mentally strong. If half of Nigeria, what if half of what is happening to Nigerian children happen to elsewhere, there will be a high rate of suicide, because you see someone who doesn't know where the next meal will come from. I have seen people like that.
You're right.
They eat this morning. They don't know where lunch will come from. They don't know where dinner will come from. Some people don't even eat breakfast. They just skip breakfast because it's part of their life. They just Whatever they see, they eat in the afternoon. Life goes on. So
Right.
in this kind of situation, mentally they are not stable, and the education will be very difficult in this kind of
Yeah.
life.
But you mentioned a really good point. You talked about the Nigerian people being strong. I think that resilience will, in the end, pay off for the people. I think in other countries, like Elva mentioned in Haiti and other countries around the world, I think that is a real key issue. You mentioned about internet. I also believe the soft skills of compassion and empathy and listening and so forth, because I'm assuming, as I mentioned before, that many of these teachers don't want you to fix every single thing.
Yeah.
We want someone to understand that, please understand that I'm not always the problem. Don't point at me as being the problem. I'm not a problem to be fixed, but
Mhm.
someone to be understood.
Yes,
And
that's what I'm saying. I'm advocating for someone who will be in the office that is not a teacher, at least for the welfare of the student and the teacher.
right,
Yeah.
right,
So even if we want to call it Dean of Teachers and Students Affairs, something like that. So whenever the teacher, has one thing, the person will run to, okay, don't worry, calm the teacher down. Let's move forward. Let's try this. Let's try that. So
right,
even most of these people are ready to do this, even without going to the university to go and study psychology or this. I know that we are very, very talented people, that someone can sit down, research, tell the person that your work is to make sure that teachers are fine,
right,
mentally, emotionally, they are okay, so that they will be productive in their work. The person knows what to do. So long if we employ the right person, not necessarily going for university, probably one or two training,
right.
the professional training can help the person, and the teachers will be productive, the student will rejoice.
Great. Well, Anthony, Michael, I want to thank you very much for joining the broadcast today. And for those that are joining as well, very insightful, help me better understand the situation in Nigeria, possible solutions, but also just to be aware of the strength of the Nigerian people and the richness of its culture. And that in the end, as they work to solve issues and problems, certainly those will be relevant to other people around the world who find and face similar situations as well. So, again, thank you so much for joining the broadcast. We look forward to you joining another episode in the future. And thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.